Many people live with a quiet but constant pressure humming beneath the surface of their lives. The pressure to get everything right, to look composed, to be impressive, capable, productive, emotionally controlled, and deeply likable. To be someone who seems to have it together. Even when that pressure is not spoken aloud, it shapes decisions, relationships, and self-worth. It tells people that they can rest later, once they have earned it. They can feel secure later, once they have proved themselves. They can belong later, once they have become a more polished version of who they are now. Brené Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection begins by challenging this entire emotional economy. The book is built on a simple but radical truth. Worthiness is not something we earn by performing well enough. We are worthy of love and belonging now, even in our unfinished, imperfect, uncertain humanity. Brown does not offer this as a comforting slogan detached from reality. She offers it as the foundation of what she calls wholehearted living. Wholehearted living is a way of moving through life with courage, compassion, connection, and authenticity instead of shame, perfectionism, and self-protection. In this book, Brown explores what gets in the way of such a life and what helps make it possible. She writes not only as a researcher, but as someone deeply familiar with the temptation to overperform, overcontrol, and overmanage. The result is a book that feels both practical and deeply human. In this summary, we will walk through the heart of the gifts of imperfection, including Brown's understanding of shame, vulnerability, authenticity, self-compassion, joy, creativity, rest, and the 10 guideposts she offers for wholehearted living. The journey of the book is not about becoming flawless. It is about becoming real. At the center of the gifts of imperfection is the phrase wholehearted living. Brown uses this term to describe a way of life rooted in the belief that we are enough as we are. Not perfect, not finished, not beyond growth, but fundamentally worthy. This matters because so much of modern life teaches the opposite. It teaches that worth must be earned through achievement, beauty, approval, discipline, productivity, or emotional self-control. Under that logic, life becomes a long performance review. You are always trying to secure your right to rest, belong, or feel at peace. Brown argues that this is not only exhausting, but deeply distorting. When people are chasing worthiness, they begin organizing their lives around protection rather than presence. They hide their uncertainty, smooth over their rough edges, silence their needs, compare themselves constantly, and become terrified of being seen as inadequate. Wholehearted living offers a different foundation. It begins when people stop asking, "What do I need to do in order to be worthy?" and start living from the belief that worthiness is already given. That shift does not remove struggle, but it changes the spirit in which struggle is faced. You no longer pursue growth in order to become acceptable. You pursue growth because your life matters. Brown's vision of wholehearted living includes courage because being real requires risk. It includes compassion because imperfection needs kindness. It includes connection because belonging depends on being known. And it includes the willingness to embrace vulnerability rather than spending a lifetime trying to outsmart it. A major foundation of Brown's work is her distinction between shame and guilt. Guilt says, "I did something bad." Shame says, "I am bad." That difference may sound subtle, but it shapes emotional life in profound ways. Guilt can be useful because it relates to behavior and can motivate repair, accountability, and change. Shame attacks identity. It tells people that they are fundamentally flawed, unworthy of love, or not enough. Brown sees shame as one of the great barriers to wholehearted living because shame drives hiding, performing, pleasing, and perfectionism. If a person believes that being imperfect makes them unworthy, then being seen becomes dangerous. They begin editing themselves constantly. They present only the acceptable parts. They avoid risks that might expose their limitations. They turn mistakes into self-definitions. Brown emphasizes that shame thrives in secrecy, silence, and judgment. When people feel ashamed, they often isolate. They assume they are the only ones struggling. They keep their experiences hidden, and in that hiding, shame grows stronger. The antidote is not shamelessness or denial. It is empathy, language, and connection. When shame is named and brought into compassionate relationship, it begins to lose its power. This insight runs beneath the whole book. Many of the habits Brown wants readers to release, such as perfectionism, comparison, numbing, and people-pleasing, are not random bad habits. They're strategies for managing the fear of not being enough. Once that fear is understood more clearly, the possibility of a different life emerges. If shame says do not let yourself be seen, Brown's answer is vulnerability. This is one of the most important and memorable ideas in the book. Brown argues that vulnerability is not weakness. It is uncertainty, emotional exposure, and risk. It is the experience of showing up when you cannot control the outcome. That might mean telling the truth in a hard conversation, asking for help, trying something creative, saying I love you first, setting a boundary, admitting fear, beginning again after failure, or allowing joy in the middle of uncertainty. Many people have learned to treat vulnerability as danger. They think strength means invulnerability, emotional containment, and constant competence. Brown challenges that assumption. She suggests that the very experiences that give life meaning, love, belonging, creativity, and courage all require vulnerability. A fully defended life may appear safer, but it is often numb, anxious, and disconnected. Brown does not romanticize vulnerability. She knows it can feel uncomfortable and frightening, but she insists that the alternative is not true safety. The alternative is a life organized around avoidance. Wholehearted living, therefore, requires the willingness to be seen without guarantees. This does not mean oversharing with everyone or abandoning discernment. It means not confusing emotional armor with genuine strength. In Brown's framework, courage and vulnerability belong together. To be wholehearted is not to eliminate uncertainty. It is to remain present and real within it. The first of Brown's guideposts for wholehearted living is cultivating authenticity and letting go of what people think. Authenticity, in her view, is not a slogan about self-expression without consequence. It is the daily practice of choosing truth over performance. It means allowing your life to reflect your values rather than only your desire to be approved of. This is difficult because human beings long to belong. We are social creatures and acceptance matters. But Brown draws an essential distinction between belonging and fitting in. Fitting in requires shape-shifting. It asks you to become what is expected. Belonging, by contrast, becomes possible when you are known as you actually are. If you sacrifice your truth in order to stay accepted, you may receive approval, but it will always feel unstable because it depends on maintaining the performance. Brown, therefore, invites readers to ask where in their lives they are editing themselves for safety. Where are they saying yes when they mean no? Where are they muting their preferences, needs, convictions, or limits in order to avoid disapproval? Authenticity is not easy because it can cost comfort. But it creates a deeper form of self-respect. To live authentically is to stop abandoning yourself as a strategy for belonging. It is one of the book's most important lessons because so much emotional exhaustion comes from trying to manage perception rather than inhabiting truth. Another central guidepost in the book is cultivating self-compassion and letting go of perfectionism. Brown is especially clear that perfectionism is often misunderstood. Many people think perfectionism is simply having high standards, being disciplined, or caring about excellence. Brown argues that perfectionism is something else. It is a defensive strategy built on the belief that if we look perfect, perform perfectly, and avoid mistakes, then we can protect ourselves from criticism, blame, shame, and pain. In other words, perfectionism is not really about becoming better. It is about trying to become unassailable. But this strategy does not work. Perfectionism does not create peace. It creates anxiety, paralysis, procrastination, and chronic self-monitoring. It makes rest feel undeserved and mistakes feel catastrophic. Brown offers self-compassion as the alternative. Self-compassion means treating yourself with kindness, common humanity, and mindful honesty. It means speaking to yourself in a way that does not intensify suffering. It means recognizing that imperfection is part of being human, not evidence that you are disqualified from love. Brown is not arguing against accountability or growth. She is arguing that shame and self-attack are poor tools for transformation. People grow more sustainably when they are not constantly at war with themselves. This guidepost is deeply practical. It asks what voice you use inside your own mind. Are you driving yourself through contempt, or are you telling the truth with respect? Brown suggests that one of the gifts of imperfection is freedom from the impossible demand to earn humanity through flawlessness. Brown also writes about cultivating a resilient spirit and letting go of numbing and powerlessness. When life feels overwhelming, uncertain, disappointing, or emotionally painful, people often try to escape themselves. That escape can take many forms. It might be food, work, alcohol, endless busyness, shopping, scrolling, emotional shutdown, or simply staying so distracted that nothing can fully land. Brown's key insight is that numbing pain does not happen selectively. When we dull fear, grief, disappointment, and shame, we also dull joy, gratitude, wonder, and tenderness. We cannot selectively numb emotion. This is one of the book's most powerful observations because it explains why heavily defended lives often feel flatter, not safer. Resilience, then, is not the ability to avoid pain. It is the capacity to stay present enough to move through pain without abandoning ourselves. Brown connects resilience with hope, critical awareness, and spirituality in a broad sense of meaning and connection. A resilient life is one that can feel deeply without dissolving into helplessness. It does not deny difficulty, but it resists the belief that the only way through difficulty is to shut down. The gift of this guidepost is not invulnerability. It is emotional aliveness. One of Brown's most moving insights is that joy can feel as vulnerable as pain. In fact, many people find joy more threatening because when something beautiful happens, the mind immediately braces for loss. A parent watching a child sleep suddenly imagines tragedy. A person in love begins anticipating betrayal. A good season at work is interrupted by fear that it will collapse. Brown sees this as a common attempt to protect ourselves. If we rehearse disaster, maybe we will be less shocked by it. But in reality, this foreboding steals the present. Brown argues that gratitude is the practice that allows joy to be fully received. Gratitude grounds us in what is here instead of what might go wrong. It does not deny the fragility of life. It honors goodness while it is present. This guidepost matters because wholehearted living is not only about enduring pain honestly. It is also about allowing beauty honestly. To feel joy requires openness, and openness means vulnerability. Brown therefore treats joy not as a reward for certainty, but as a courageous act. Gratitude helps make that courage possible. It tells the truth about blessing without demanding permanence. The result is a life less dominated by anticipatory fear and more able to inhabit moments of wonder, love, beauty, and peace. Brown speaks as well about cultivating intuition and trusting faith while letting go of the need for certainty. In a world that often prizes control, evidence, and clear outcomes, this guidepost can feel especially challenging. But Brown's point is not that reason should be abandoned. Her point is that many meaningful aspects of life cannot be lived only through certainty. Relationships, creativity, parenthood, love, leadership, and growth all involve ambiguity. If a person waits for total guarantees before acting, they may never truly live. Brown links this guidepost to trust, both trust in oneself and trust in a larger sense of meaning. Intuition, in her framework, is not magical certainty. It is the grounded wisdom that emerges when people are connected to themselves and willing to pay attention. The need for certainty, by contrast, often hides fear. It becomes a way to avoid vulnerability. Brown invites readers to loosen that grip. Not to become careless, but to recognize that wholehearted living requires movement even when not everything is known. This creates room for courage. It also creates room for humility, because a life without certainty must be lived with openness rather than rigid control. Another guidepost Brown emphasizes is cultivating creativity and letting go of comparison. She treats creativity as a human capacity, not a special category reserved for artists or geniuses. Creativity includes making, experimenting, expressing, building, problem-solving, imagining, and engaging with life in a generative way. Yet many adults stop thinking of themselves as creative because they compare themselves relentlessly to others. They assume that if what they produce is not exceptional, polished, or commercially valuable, then it does not count. Brown rejects that thinking. Comparison, she argues, is a major thief of creativity because it turns self-expression into performance measurement. Instead of asking what wants to be made, people ask whether what they make will be good enough. This question often shuts down the process before it begins. Wholehearted living requires a return to creativity as participation rather than proof. Brown is not saying quality never matters. She is saying that comparison-based paralysis keeps many people from touching a vital part of themselves. To create imperfectly is often healthier than to consume endlessly while envying others who dared to make something. The deeper lesson is that expression itself is part of being alive. Comparison disconnects us from our own voice. Creativity reconnects us. Brown also turns to something many adults neglect, cultivating play and rest while letting go of exhaustion as a status symbol and productivity as self-worth. In many environments, busyness is treated almost like virtue. Being overwhelmed becomes evidence of importance. Rest begins to feel lazy, and play starts to feel childish or wasteful. Brown challenges this entire framework. She argues that a life without rest becomes brittle, joyless, and disconnected from its own limits. A life without play becomes overmanaged and emotionally thin. Play and rest are not indulgences added after everything important is finished. They are conditions that help make a sustainable and wholehearted life possible. Without rest, people lose perspective, patience, and emotional flexibility. Without play, spontaneity withers. Brown's point is especially important for people who have linked worthiness with usefulness. If you only feel good about yourself when you are producing, achieving, or serving, then rest can feel like a threat to identity. But wholehearted living includes the ability to stop, to delight, to be refreshed, to inhabit life not only as a task, but as an experience. Brown is reminding the reader that humans are not machines for output. They require restoration, and they need forms of joy that are not constantly justified by performance. Another essential guidepost is cultivating calm and stillness and letting go of anxiety as a lifestyle. Brown recognizes how easy it is to become addicted to urgency. For many people, speed and stress become familiar enough to feel normal. They move quickly, react constantly, stay overstimulated, and rarely pause long enough to hear what is happening inside them. Brown suggests that this state is not neutral. It can become a way of avoiding difficult emotions or unresolved truths. Calm, in her understanding, is not the complete absence of challenge. It is the ability to create perspective in the midst of challenge. Stillness, likewise, is not passivity. It is a way of making enough room for reflection, prayer, contemplation, or simple inward attention. Wholehearted living needs that room because otherwise life becomes a sequence of reactions rather than a process of aligned response. This guidepost asks people to become less driven by reactivity and more rooted in presence. In a noisy and accelerated culture, that can feel almost rebellious. Brown also writes about cultivating meaningful work and letting go of self-doubt and supposed to. This is one of the places where the book expands beyond emotional healing into questions of vocation and direction. Many people live according to inherited scripts. They know what they are supposed to value, how they are supposed to perform success, what kind of life would look respectable, and what choices would make them seem responsible or impressive. But a life can look appropriate from the outside and still feel deeply misaligned on the inside. Brown encourages readers to examine that gap. Meaningful work does not necessarily mean glamorous work or public achievement. It means engaging your time, energy, and abilities in ways that connect with purpose and integrity. It means paying attention to what matters to you rather than living only by expectation. Wholehearted living requires that kind of examination because self-betrayal is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet compliance over many years. Letting go of supposed to does not mean becoming selfish or impulsive. It means asking whether your life reflects your values or merely your conditioning. That question can be unsettling, but it is often the beginning of a more honest path. Brown's final guidepost may seem playful, but it carries real depth. She writes about cultivating laughter, song, and dance, and letting go of being cool and always in control. These are symbols of uninhibited aliveness. Many adults become so concerned with appearance and self-management that they stop participating freely in joy. They want to look composed. They want to avoid awkwardness. They want to remain untouched by embarrassment. But this kind of chronic self-consciousness narrows life. It keeps people from delight, spontaneity, and expression. Brown sees this as another way shame shows up. It whispers that freedom is foolish, that full participation is dangerous, that image matters more than presence. Laughter, song, and dance are ways of refusing that message. They are ways of saying that being alive includes mess, awkwardness, and emotional openness. This guidepost is not really about entertainment. It is about loosening the grip of image and allowing the body and spirit to participate in life more fully. Wholehearted living includes seriousness, but it is not built on self-containment alone. As the book gathers its themes together, it becomes clear that the gifts of imperfection are not romanticized flaws or a refusal to grow. Brown is not suggesting that pain is automatically beautiful or that hard work no longer matters. Rather, the gifts of imperfection are the things that become possible when we stop organizing our lives around the impossible task of being flawless. When shame loosens, connection becomes easier. When perfectionism softens, creativity returns. When vulnerability is no longer treated as weakness, courage expands. When comparison relaxes, authenticity deepens. When busyness stops being a badge of worth, rest becomes restorative rather than guilty. In this sense, imperfection is not the obstacle to life. It is the condition under which real life is lived. Brown's argument is not anti-discipline or anti-growth. It is anti-shame. She wants readers to understand that striving can be healthy when it emerges from worthiness, but damaging when it is driven by the need to prove worthiness. That distinction changes everything. A person can pursue excellence without believing that mistakes erase their dignity. They can take responsibility without collapsing into self-hatred. They can long for growth without treating their current humanity as a problem to be solved. The lasting power of the gifts of imperfection comes from the way it speaks to a common, but rarely admitted ache, the ache of feeling that who you are right now is not quite acceptable. Brené Brown meets that ache with both honesty and compassion. She does not pretend that wholehearted living is easy. It asks for courage. It asks you to face shame, release perfectionism, tell the truth, rest when a culture rewards exhaustion, create without comparison, feel joy without bracing against it, and let yourself be seen without guarantees. But she insists that this is the path to a fuller life. Not a polished life, but a whole one. A life in which love is not earned by pretending. A life in which belonging is not purchased with self-abandonment. A life in which imperfection is not evidence of failure, but evidence of humanity. Perhaps the deepest insight of the book is that the transformation Brown describes does not begin once everything has been fixed. It begins with the decision to believe that you are already worthy of care, truth, connection, and joy. From there, the rest of the practices start to make sense. They are not strategies for becoming valuable. They are expressions of the value that was already there. That is the invitation at the heart of the Gifts of Imperfection. To stop waiting to become acceptable. To stop hustling for worthiness. To start living imperfectly but wholeheartedly now.